Hello and welcome back for the Sheepdog Brotherhood. Doug Hewlett here with Brett Atterbury, um, who has a lot of technical difficulties in general. What I wanted to this is going to be a quick intro for episode 13. When we originally filmed it last week with Joel Maurer from Dink Ninjas, unfortunately, Brett, you know, his computer showed its age. It didn't record. It didn't do as it was supposed to, and because of that, there is weird video of Joel and myself nodding like trained dogs, dolphins maybe, while Brett was talking, but his computer didn't record any of the audio. So
No, Doug, I think what we did is our editor took out a lot of that. But there's still parts in there where you're talking to Joel, and you're saying like, and Brett, and don't you think Brett? It's like I'm the person who's there in the conversation, but not there physically, which makes it look kind of strange.
it's like the Holy Spirit.
Correct.
Yeah,
Except
yeah.
without the holy part. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, in any event, we hope you enjoy episode 13. Most importantly, we hope that you enjoy the conversation we had with Joel. Just an outstanding guy. Got a great entrepreneurial spirit. He's doing great things in the pickleball world. But yeah, we hope that you enjoy the episode, even with its technical difficulties. So, with that, episode 13. Thanks so much. Hello and welcome back for, believe it or not, the 13th installment of the Sheepdog Brotherhood. I have with me, as always, the replaceable Brett Atterbury. And as a guest today, we also have Joel Maurer, the founder and CEO of Dink Ninjas, a pickleball apparel company. But strangely enough, we don't have we don't have Joel here today to talk about pickleball, which I know probably burst his balloon when we told him we didn't want him talking about pickleball. I'm sure it will come up in the course of this conversation, but
Yes.
yeah, we wanted to bring Joel in because he's involved in some really interesting organizations as part of his business, and it has such a wonderful dovetail to what it is that we're doing here at Sheepdog Brotherhood. And Joel's message, I thought, would be great to extend to our audience of two people. So while we could have just texted the thought to them directly, my mom's really bad and my dad are really bad with cell phones. So we figured
Hey, you
we'd just
didn't include my family of two to three people too. I think we could, if we really stretch this, we're up to 10, double
That's a
digits.
that's a big group text, if you ask me.
Well, thank you for being here with us today, Joel. Happy Easter. And it's the week after Easter, but thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Honored to do so, man.
Hey, why not? Let's give you the chance to plug Dink Ninjas since it will come up anyway. This way it's a lot more, it doesn't feel as contrived. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Dink Ninjas?
Yeah, we don't want to force anything on anybody. So I founded Dink Ninjas Pickleball about a year ago after playing avidly for about 6 months. And started the brand. And we do hats, shirts, all kinds of apparel items, do paddles as well. Um, and been getting some traction. Actually started it out of a bit of an adverse situation. My wife was diagnosed with cancer, and being a young dad, or an old dad of young kids, I should say, not so young anymore. But I was in a bad headspace, having that diagnosis where my wife is young and healthy and gets a cancer diagnosis. So wanted to figure out how to clear my head and blow off some steam and get some mental health stability and kind of therapeutic. So started the brand, and it's been gaining traction from there, and been getting involved in a bunch of different causes and having a lot of fun with it.
So we lost Brett there for a second, just as Joel was ready to get into the meat of his origin story here, and Brett ran out of hours on his AOL CD account. So Free 10,000 hours ran out finally after all these years.
It was
That's what I
bound to
always
happen
do.
at some point.
Yeah. I owned stock in AOL back then. Just kidding.
So let's we'll kind of bring it back. So Joel, you were about to tell us how you got involved with a network called NGBN.
Yeah. So late January, I was approached on LinkedIn, of all places, by one of the show hosts who has a show on NGBN TV. NGBN TV is a men's television streaming network that is their mission is to provide content, entertainment, sports, mental health, physical health, all kinds of different programming to support men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And they approached me and liked what I was doing. They liked the brand that I had created. And so, over a couple conversations, ended up forming a strategic national partnership with them to be their official pickleball paddle apparel and accessories partner. Um, and they launched on January 28th. And their first live broadcasts and all that were out at the Super Bowl. They were on broadcast row out there, radio row on the Super Bowl coverage, and we're interviewing a bunch of different NFL stars, veterans, all kinds of different charitable organizations they were interviewing out there that were a part of it. And so we've been able to partner with them, create some advertising commercials with them to run on some of their programming, and really get plugged into a lot of their mission of supporting men, veterans, mental health causes, veterans causes, all kinds of different stuff. And it's really, for us, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. We're really going to be able to dig in and really help support their mission and their cause.
Once you opened up and shared sort of the reasoning behind what you had going on, why you started Dink Ninjas, kind of what that flowed from, it seems as though from an outside perspective, you've had just absolutely tremendous growth from that point, because you became more human, you became more relatable. You disclosed a vulnerability, and I don't want to say a weakness, but like you, in the classical terms, right? Like a lot of men nowadays feel like they don't and can't share what's really going on. And the minute you did that, things changed for you dramatically.
Tremendously, and within really hours or a day.
Mm-hmm.
When I got approached originally by Chris Fontana. He's got a show on NGBN TV called The Primal Mindset, and that's who approached me originally, and talked to him, and didn't really share a whole lot of detail of what was going on and what inspired me and drove me to do this. And shortly after that conversation, I think that conversation happened on a Friday. Saturday morning, I'm talking to my wife about how inspiring Chris is and his story and all the adversity that he faced. And he's come through it. He's an amazing dad to two young kids that are close to my kids' ages. He's an amazing husband. He's just got a great career going on and great prospects ahead. And I was telling my wife how inspiring the conversation was to me. And she says, "Well, what did you share with him?" And I said, "Well, I didn't, mentally, I didn't think I had a chance to share that." And so he texts me Saturday morning, right while I'm in that conversation with my wife, talking about how inspiring this guy is. He texts me and he says, "Hey, we're recording a new episode of my show on Wednesday. Any chance you want to be a guest?" My guest had to postpone their appearance. I say, "I would be honored. I would be so stoked to be a guest on your show. But in the meantime, we need to have another conversation about what's going on. And I've got some stuff to share with you." And I get on the phone with him about 20 minutes later and share the story of my wife's diagnosis, all the adversity that we faced, all the different things that we fought through, and how blessed we are that she's back healthy and her hormones are back where they should be. And she's just improving every day. He says, "Holy, this is going to be an amazing episode." Thank you so much for sharing all this information and opening up to me and being able to be vulnerable. And I told him, hey, your conversation with me and your willingness to be vulnerable over a Zoom call when we have never met, we've never spent time together, we didn't grow up together, you don't know my story, my background, your willingness to be vulnerable and share all the adversity that you faced and the fact that you're literally kicking butt now in life. It was, I said, that's what inspired me, man. Your vulnerability inspired me, and gave me the fuel to open up to you, and gave me the fuel to open up as a guest on his show that following Wednesday. Um, but I think that it takes someone who's willing to almost spearhead the conversation and be vulnerable, put themselves out there to open up, because then it opens the door. You realize, hey, this person's willing to be honest and forthright with what they've been through and their fights that they've fought through and come out on the other side. It's leaves, to me mentally, it leaves an open invitation to, okay, what's my contribution to the conversation?
You know, it's it's funny. I think we take for granted. Excuse me. We take for granted the fact that, you know, in many ways, none of us are that special and unique, in the sense that we've all gone through some sort of calamity. We've dealt with an issue. We're going through issues, possibly. And as men, I think we often just internalize it and say, like, I need to put on this face, this mask of, I've got it under control. You know, I'm steering this ship. Everything's good, and I'm good, and everything's good. Don't worry about me. Let's focus on somebody else. And the fact of the matter is, you're probably not. Things are like barely held together with like bubble tape and like an old piece of dental floss. You know, everyone around you can tell that something's not right, but people don't do exactly that. They don't engage. They don't ask the questions to get you to open up. In my own life, as I've shared on this podcast before, in May of last year, I got terminated from a job. Granted, that I hated, but it was in an industry that I'd been in for 2 decades and had looked for the exit, couldn't find the exit, and finally the exit found me, right? And they ushered me right on through it. But I didn't tell anybody that I had been fired, right? I made it sound like I picked my time when I was leaving and I was out the door. But when I finally opened up and started sharing with people what had happened, and publicly, like, you know, on LinkedIn and social media, when I shared what happened, the number of people that reached out to me to thank me for just telling the truth, not that anyone knew that it wasn't the truth, but just sharing the vulnerability of losing a job, feeling lost, feeling like an elephant was sitting on my chest, and just nervous about what the next step was. What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of him? Like all the things that we as men worry about. You know, a bunch of my friends they didn't know. And the ones that did know, like never bothered to reach out and ask and see how I was doing. The people that did reach out and the people that did check in and see how I was doing, obviously we have a much tighter bond. And it's because they were with me going through some crap. And all they had to do was just, hey man, how are you doing? And the funny thing is, I felt instantly better when I shared what was going on and was able to unload that burden. Because when I looked to the men to my left and to my right, the ones that knew that, what was happening and what was taking place, they were there, and I didn't feel alone. And that was just so, not to say, I feel like the word empowering is so overused, and it generally refers to women. But
This is unprecedented, Doug.
the feeling like I had another man who could understand what it is to be a man and feel like I don't have all the answers, which none of us do, right? But to stand next to a buddy and be like, hey man, like I'm up to my eyeballs in stress and worried about how I'm going to pay for things. How am I going to take care of my wife? How am I going to take care of my daughter? How am I going to pay the mortgage? Like, what's going to happen? Soon as I shared it, that stress went away, and it suddenly didn't have power over me anymore. And I think that, you and I were talking yesterday in preparation for this, and you explained that you were involved yesterday in a really interesting event. And I think it may be interesting to share some of what you learned yesterday. Do you mind doing that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So NGBN TV, they set out the goal of educating 100,000 individuals with suicide first aid. There's obviously a lot of suicide going on around the world, and especially for one reason or another, in compounds in the U.S. The numbers are far greater in the U.S. And so they set out a goal. They've got Craig Hannum, and he's a retired Army soldier. He did 20 years in the Army, and he's now retired. And he's come back as a civilian to basically spearhead suicide first aid and train people and educate them to be aware of their surroundings and be able to look for signs and look for breadcrumbs that people are dropping that, hey, we are broken. There is an issue, a mental health issue, a financial issue, a relationship issue that folks are going through, and they don't have an exit strategy from that situation that has a positive outcome. And he, yesterday was the seminar, the training. They did a 2-hour training, and they did it on a 9 a.m. Eastern time and 9 a.m. Pacific time, and had an incredible response, an incredible reception, had tons and tons of people register for it. And the great thing is, all the content that NGBN TV produces is on demand. So if you've missed it, if you didn't get acquainted with the cause in time, you can go to ngbntv.com and check out all their content, and you'll be able to check out the Save a Life suicide first aid. And one thing that really stuck out to me with the training was the suicide rate of small communities, of quote unquote blue collar communities, people who actually, in my opinion, actually work for a living. They're welders, they're farmers, they're ranchers, they're construction workers, they're cement guys, they drive trucks, they do all these things that society basically hinges on. If they stop doing what they're doing, no one else can survive. They're not going to have food, they're not going to have housing, they're not going to have roads to drive on. And the suicide rate is much, much higher in those communities and in those workspaces. And one of the things that they attributed to was those are the career paths and the jobs and the communities that are super tight. Everyone knows everybody, and it is conducive to not sharing what's going on in your life. These guys, they're salt of the earth. They're the tough guys. They can do anything with their hands. They can do anything they want to survive and be successful in all these communities and environments, to give us what we need to be successful in the more metropolitan areas. But I think with the toughness of the mindset and the toughness of the survival instincts, and to be successful in these really difficult physically demanding careers, it creates this Superman syndrome where nothing's ever wrong, and if it is, nobody's ever going to hear about it. They're going to bottle it up. They're not going to share with their buddy they're cutting down trees with or building roads with or whatever, because there's a fear there of being vulnerable. There's a fear of being ostracized from your job or your community or your family, because you're not tough enough to deal with what's thrown your way. And I found that very interesting, that they have done extensive research and statistics and figured out that it's these smaller communities with physically demanding careers that suffer the most. And I think that in the US, I think that a lot of our veterans and first responders and all these different careers come from those communities.
Mhm.
A lot of the people who've served in our military have volunteered and put their lives on the line, coming from small towns and small communities. And a lot of these folks end up suffering the most with mental health issues and mental health crisis type situations.
Mhm.
And it was striking to me that it's not, the numbers are not across the board. You can't just take a slice of the US stockbrokers, attorneys, surgeons, and welders, bridge builders, fabricators, construction workers. It's not an even slice across society that is susceptible to suicide. And I found that to be a really unique statistic to me. It really stuck out to me that it's actually elevated in those communities.
So, Joel, you made a comment earlier. You mentioned about people dropping breadcrumbs, right? And I'm curious, and maybe this didn't come up in the talk. Is it common that people who are dealing with things, those who are at risk of suicide, do they often, is that a characteristic of these people? Or because so I feel like so often you hear like there was no sign, right? Is there in fact generally, are people actually sharing signs?
They are. They are. And that was something that I really, really encourage everybody who watches and listens to this to check out that training, that seminar, because there was a lot of really good information. He's the speaker is a true expert in this field, and is got some really cutting edge ideas and takes on it. And there actually are a lot of different things that you can look for. Um, there's a lot of folks who they're very closed off. They're not going to talk about things that are of any consequence or that would put them in a vulnerable state. But really, a lot of what it takes is someone to listen to what they have to say. One of his points was, when you're having a conversation with someone, no matter what the conversation is based on or what the subject matter is, you're listening 80% of the time and you're talking 20% of the time. And if you have someone in your workspace or your social circles or your family that is closed off and they don't share things and they don't talk about things that are going on, you can ask questions about whatever it is that they're into. You start a conversation, you say, hey, what do you think about the St. Louis Rams relocating to LA? Or, they're a big Rams fan, they're a big football fan, they're whatever it is. You can start a conversation that is in a field that they're passionate about, that is a hobby that they're interested in. Oh, I hear you were interested in learning the skill of welding, so you can start fabricating things. Or, you can start a conversation about what they're interested in, and you can per, per, help them perceive that, hey, this guy, he's not intimidating. He's starting a conversation with me. It's an open ended conversation. I have the ability to share my point of view on a sports team or whatever is going on. The whole thing is starting a dialogue with these people and starting a conversation. And you can realize and help them realize that, hey, we've got a lot of common ground here, whatever it is, in football, or like I mentioned, welding or fabricating. You create common ground, and you create the open communication channel there. Once that channel is open, they are going to feel a lot more willing to share what's going on. And just remembering that, don't, if you feel like something's going on or something is not right, or somebody's experiencing something that they don't want to talk about, remember that you want them to be able to identify what's going on themselves through your conversation. If you bring it back to you, that's not creating the positive connection that they need to see and hear to be able to share what they need to get off their chest. Like you're talking about, Doug, you get something off your chest, you feel a million times better.
Mm-hmm.
The elephant's gone. Now you can have open dialogue with an inordinate number of people that you weren't able to even talk to before. But I think that something to always remember is listening for these different cues of what to look for. You're listening to them 80% of the time, and you're talking 20% of the time. And I think that a lot of our conversations, whether it's in a situation of mental health or physical health or whatever the case is, if we remembered that we're not in charge of the conversation, we're not going to spearhead this thing, we're listening to whoever we're talking to 80% of the time, we would have much more fruitful communication men, between men and women, between everybody that we communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
To me, um, I'm very social. I'll walk up to anybody, talk to them about all kinds of different stuff. It doesn't matter what you're into. I'm willing to listen and figure out what you're passionate about. And I think that with these different communities, with these guys that are in the trades, and the determination and the drive and the work ethic that these people have, men and women across the board, to be successful and to build a business of their own and to support their families, they're absolutely determined to be successful. And I think if we can, like you said, give people a platform, give people the ability, open the door for them to be able to share. If you took even 2% of the work ethic and the determination that these people have, and you turned it on a dime and you said, we need you to be this determined, take this work ethic, this determination to address mental health in your communities. Because if you open that door and somehow you tweak that mindset to take that insane determination that very few of us have in society and take that and tweak it to say, hey, we want you to be is determined to be successful in your career, take that level of determination and steer it towards your mental health and your well-being. And society I have no idea how it has, in my opinion, degenerated so much to where everything is insanely accessible. Everybody has everything at their fingertips in the US. Communication, social media, all that. And I would say that mental health wise, we're probably more closed off than we've ever been, even in this information age.
Mhm.
And if we can use all the different platforms, all the different things that we have available to us for good, if we can use social media for good, if we can use podcasts like y'all are producing for good, if we can use all these different streaming networks, all these different internet age technology platforms for good, then we can definitely change lives. And to me, if I can change one, I'm doing great. If I can turn one person's life around, one person's day around, one person's just thought process for that moment around with my personality and willingness to put forth the effort, then I'm a success. If I can create happiness and mental health stability in this time of crisis that we have going on, I'm going to be as successful as I ever want to be.
You know, I think I think sometimes what you're doing, the fact that you've shared that, when you are vulnerable, you show others that it's safe to be vulnerable. And I think I stumbled on this quote yesterday or 2 days ago that I shared with both of you guys, which is sort of the genesis of this podcast today. And it was somebody on LinkedIn had talked about Marcus Aurelius, and I think this is a translation because given the fact that he's you know, an ancient Italian uh, emperor, I doubt he spoke this way. But here's the updated translation, which was, "Don't be ashamed to need help. Like a soldier storming a wall, you have a mission to accomplish. And if you've been wounded and you need a comrade to lift you up, so what?" Right? And that's where we're at today is, if you were trying to accomplish a mission, whatever that mission is, and you were in combat, you know, you don't pretend like, you've been mortally wounded and like, "No, guys, I got it. I'm bleeding out here, but trust me, I'm gonna accomplish my mission." Chances are you're not, if you've been crippled, if you've been wounded. And it just takes the simple act of opening up and disclosing that information to someone, because there are so many men in your lives that are willing to step up. Not everybody will, right? I mean, that's just the simple truth. There are some people that will just be like, I don't want to deal with that. But there are far more men in your immediate group or even strangers that are willing to just sit and listen and be there for you the way you've talked about here, Joel. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think that's a terribly important message, because what Brett and I are trying to help men stand in the gap to fulfill the duty that we've been called to fulfill by God, to protect the dignity of every woman. And we can't do that if we are, wounded and not sharing anything with anyone, right? Like we're not any help to anyone. So thank you for sharing all that, Joel. That was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Chris Fontana, who I was a guest on his show, his saying that he repeats is, "Be the best for the ones who need you most." And I think that rings true to me, because if I'm not at my best, then I cannot be the best for the ones who need me most. And in all these situations, my wife needs me, my kids need me, my community needs me, my church needs me, whoever it is, someone that I don't even know yet, and I will meet because they're going to be put in my path tomorrow or Wednesday or whenever. I want to be my best. because I have no idea who I'm going to run into, and I have no idea what battles they're fighting currently or have fought or will fight in the future. And if I can have the best, most positive outlook and willingness to help those around me, if I can be that, then I've got a great foundation going on.
I think it's, Brett, tell me what you think of this. I think it's important to distinguish, though, that we don't have to have solved the problem. We don't have to be on the other side of the calamity that we're currently facing in order to be what we're talking about to someone else. You don't have to have the answer in order to hear someone else, to find the problem that they're dealing with, and then just be there for them.
I think that it's interesting that between the three of us, we all had a very similar outcome to very different experiences. And I think that if if men and women realized that that's the feeling that you're going to have after you share what you've been holding in for so long, if they could realize ahead of time, hey, like you said, everything's going to be all right. This is what you need to do. You need to share what you've been holding back on for so long. If you can get that word out, if you will, and encourage people to get that off their chest, I think that that would give them the ability to put fuel to that fire and say, hey, let's let go. Let's be vulnerable. Let's share what was going on, whether it's a life experience or whatever it is that they've been hanging on to that's been, like Doug said, the elephant on their chest. Who wants to walk around in life with an elephant on their chest? You have zero freedom. You have zero mental health freedom. It's no fun. And if everyone continues to be as closed off as they are, like we talked about, the mental health crisis and the suicide rate will just compound. Between 2020, they shared between 2020 and 2023, and I guess the research organizations are projecting for 2024 with the information they already have, it's become exponentially worse just from 2020 to now 2024. And we have within us, within all of us, we have the tools and the ability to turn that around and crush those numbers, because suicide is not a necessity. It doesn't have to be viewed as a solution for people who are in crisis. It needs to be, when you're in crisis, you need to feel like you can reach out and you can talk to people and you can share with them what was going on. Because I don't think that people realize that they can share. And there would be people like yourselves who would just bring you in and give you a huge hug and let you know, hey, we're receiving you exactly the way you are. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to be better at anything to be part of my brotherhood, part of our brotherhood, part of our community of strong men who are constantly striving to be stronger and better for everyone that we come in contact with. And the strange thing to me is vulnerability is viewed as a weakness in today's society, and it really needs to be viewed as a strength. Mm-hmm. This guy is got it together. He's very strong, and that's why he is given the ability to open up, because it's actually a strength. Sharing with you guys and sharing with your community and your brothers, that's actually a strength. It's not a weakness. It's not a cry for help. It doesn't need to be viewed like that. It needs to be viewed as a strength. He feels confident in himself and what he's lived through and his life experiences to be able to share, because that could be the key to them sharing back with you. and creating a dialogue of strengthening one another.
There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Think about it like this for any man that may be listening to this today. Think of it in terms of your vehicle is broken, right? And there's men who know how to work on vehicles, and there are men who don't know how to work on vehicles. If you happen to be someone who doesn't know how to work on a vehicle, and your car makes a funny noise, you open the hood and just start messing around with stuff and you have no idea what you're doing, it's going to be worse, right? But those guys who recognize, like, yeah, I'm not a car guy. I don't know how a carburetor works or fuel injection or if the doohickey plugs into the flux capacitor, whatever. If you are one of those guys, you know enough to go, I'm going to call my buddy Earl, who loves working on cars because he knows how to fix everything. Like, there's no shame in asking for help of someone who knows more, or just like, hey man, like, I don't know what this is. It made this funny noise. What do you think? I don't know. I like analogies.
I think that somehow the stigma or the approach that we have to suicide needs to be changed, because something that the speaker was talking about is people say, oh yeah, it was really tragic, so and so committed suicide. And he said, no one's committing suicide. People commit murder, people commit crimes, people commit rape. They don't commit suicide. Suicide is a decision that they made to take their own lives and take that approach, take that outcome to their situation. Committing suicide should not be, it shouldn't have a stigma of they're committing it like it's a crime. It should be a cry for help. And I think that if that is changed in our communities and in our society, what that is and what leads to it, I believe that we can change the numbers of people who take their lives and they find that as a solution, because it's, having experienced a relative taking his life, it's absolutely not a crime. It's a solution that they found, that they thought was a solution, that it was the least criminal act anyone could ever do. It's not a crime. Nobody's committing it. And I think that that needs to change. And I also think that with the information age that we have, it needs to be public information, the numbers of people who are taking their lives. In the promotion of this seminar, the training session that we had yesterday, Friday morning, it's going to be broadcast on Saturday morning. Friday morning, between Friday morning and 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 7,600 and something people in the United States attempted to take their lives. And that's a day. That's mind-blowing. They were talking about worldwide, there's about 760,000 people who attempt to take their lives. And I believe that it's directly tied to the lack of communication, the lack of openness, the lack of willing to be vulnerable, like we're talking about. And I am not a research analyst in this field. I haven't been informed of these numbers. But after partnering with this network, after partnering with NGBN TV, and this is one of their main goals, is to stomp out suicide. Just erase it. It's not even something that's considered by anyone even anymore. After seeing the research and seeing the numbers that all these people have, if that was public information, there would be a total change of everyone's mindset of this is something that happens all day, every day, highly concentrated in the US, which is really far fetched to me to have the most established, most well to do, most civilized nation on planet Earth be the one that's having the worst go at this. It seems like it would be in, third world countries where life is really, really difficult. You'd think that there'd be greater numbers there than there would be in Chicago or Wisconsin or, wherever it is in the US. I think it's really, really troublesome and troubling to me that it's such a great number and almost no one knows about it.
Mm. Well, this has been a really enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned, Joel. For what you've learned, how it's impacted your life, and how your mission has changed. Where can we find you? How do we find you someplace?
You can find me on basically every social media platform out there at Dink Ninjas. And you can also check out our website, dinkninjas.com, and pick up some merch or pick up a paddle, or if you want to support one of our causes. A lot of our products in the future. One of our paddles gives back to the Texas Oncology Foundation. But as we've partnered with the NGBN TV, there's going to be a lot of different products that are given back to veterans' causes, suicide awareness, mental health, all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Honored.
Don't we're gonna say goodbye here, but don't hang up yet because we've got to make sure that everything uploads first.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Have a great day, guys.
You too.